This is the Coaching Leader Podcast, a podcast about coaching, leadership, and leading through coaching. And here's your host, Scott Gress.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Coaching Leader Podcast. If you weren't aware, we're available on iTunes and Google Play, Stitcher, and Overcast, but most recently, we've also been available on YouTube. Some older recordings as audio, but a lot of the newer ones in video as well. And as we're recording it today, it's March 27th, 2020, right in the middle of all of this with the coronavirus and how we're dealing with it. There's a lot of anxiety in society and probably the world in general, but also within organizations, businesses, among leaders. And it seemed like a great idea to pull together some folks who know something about both leadership and anxiety to bring some content and help and encouragement to us. And so we've invited some folks from an organization that I'm connected with, Lutheran Counseling Services, together today. Lutheran Counseling Services is a regional counseling center in Florida. In Central Florida, they have 12 locations scattered throughout the state. And they've been very active in serving people with anxiety, as you can imagine, but also post 9/11, serving folks in the New York area and the Gulf Coast post Hurricane Katrina, and then also after things like Sandy Hook. And so we encourage you to listen to the podcast and learn from some of the things that they have to share with us today. I'm joined by the executive director, Megan Meisler, and also by their former executive director, who now serves as the ministry care coordinator, Reverend Dr. Rick Armstrong. Hi, guys. How are you today?
Doing well. How are you?
Doing okay. Doing okay. I wondered how things are kind of different for you all in your counseling practice in the past 2 to 3 weeks with all of this that's ramped up with coronavirus.
I would say just in the last 2 weeks, down here in Florida, we were on spring break for the first week of all of when things really escalated. And so not much changed in our offices, but in the last week, a lot more sessions have gone virtual for us. We've been offering a lot more things online and just seeing less people face to face, but we have continued to see our regular client load throughout these last 2 weeks for sure.
And I would say that the subject of the coronavirus has somewhat surprised me that for some folks it has really occupied the session. And for other folks, really only has come up as we've had to explain why we're offering virtual counseling. And so for some folks it's a big issue and for some it's not right now.
Yeah. Boy, things have... you can just see the difference. A couple of weeks ago, I canceled a trip to go visit my father, telling my sister how traffic around here has just gone way down with the season. And then you go in the stores and a lot of things are gone, like toilet paper. What in the world is going on with everybody taking all the toilet paper? Help us understand that and anxiety, please.
I think a piece of all the toilet paper being gone is, kind of panic on people. But when I've been talking about the toilet paper all being gone, we know that when we're anxious, we're usually anxious about things that we can't control. So we try to find things that we can control. And I think stocking up on toilet paper, Lysol wipes, the bread was gone in our grocery store. All of those things are things that I can do to control something that feels so out of my control. We're encouraging people to maybe look for things to control, like their schedules or how they're spending their time, rather than going and buying all of their supplies. But I think a big reason that we see those grocery stores wiped out is because we want something to do in order to feel like we're ready and when we're in control of something that feels so much out of our control.
Sure. Sure.
That's why I think all the toilet paper is gone. But there could be a whole lot of other issues going on there too.
And
I was taken back to when we saw all of that, and my wife and I discussed the neighborhood we live in whenever Hurricane Charlie came through. That there were only a few houses that had boarded up their windows, and there was really no houses that the windows were blown out or whatever. And so when the next 3 storms were coming through, and they were all predicted to be less intense, more and more people boarded up their windows. And it was like, why are you doing that? It's not you need to do something to feel secure.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think I agree with Megan. I think that's a lot of it.
And so is there also an element of maybe losing a little bit of your rational brain and doing some more you just lose that ability to really be I guess rational is the only word that comes to me. Is there something to that too?
Well, I saw a post just this morning that my friend shared with me, and she's like, it said, I either feel like I'm overreacting or underreacting because I don't know how I should react. So you either feel like you're over the top or you're blowing it off too much. And so part of our rational brain is trying to think, what should we be doing? But we honestly don't have anything to compare it to. We try down here probably to compare it to hurricanes, but we've talked about it. Like, I know when a hurricane's going to come and leave us. And that is a sense of control. Like, I have a time frame. We don't have a time frame. And so it's so hard to always keep your brain in that chaotic state.
Mm-hmm. In chaos, we primarily react. In chaos, we don't usually respond to chaos by rationally thinking our way through right away. We react. The amygdala portion of our brain kicks in. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm saying that as the normal way, fight or flight stuff that goes on for us.
Yeah, how God intended us to respond in crisis times. It's just we can't stay in that for a month.
But we may.
But we may have to.
So a lot has changed the past couple of weeks. What's important to know about change?
Well, I think that discussion there was a great introduction to it, because I think that what happens to us in change, when things have changed, what we want to do is we want to go back to the way it was. And but the reality is, usually for extended change, it's not going to be the way that it was, that there's a new normal for us to reach out there, but we don't go right away from what was to what will be. And so there is that. One author calls it the period of confusion and distress. I think the description of doing too little or too much and trying to find the balance in there is another description. For Christian spiritual people, sometimes maybe we think of Exodus and the wilderness wanderings as we move from, emotionally moving from what was to what will be. I have heard the phrase over and over, we have never been here before. And I think that really describes change. And I personally believe that we are going to be different when all of this is done. I mean, there's just so many things about us that we're experiencing that we're trying to get comfortable with, that we're trying to get through our discomfort and everything as we try to seek the new normal, but it's still out there somewhere. So,
And I would say that in this time too, man, even for our practice, like I've been able to do some things virtually that I've wanted our organization to do. Maybe not this fast or this rapidly, but I could see the great potential that can come out of this too in that change. So that new normal doesn't always have to be this negative piece.
Yeah. And I know that also with change, you're having to wrestle with a loss oftentimes. And that's difficult too. And maybe not exactly knowing when this is going to be over or what it's going to look like when you're through only adds to that anxiety, because you don't know what's going to be, what you're ultimately going to have to say goodbye to permanently.
Well, I think there's a piece in that. I know that I experience that sometimes. You know, I get up early in the morning, I read my newspaper, I look at what are the numbers now, and I find myself I have found myself recently looking at the numbers and saying, whoa, those are people. And then as things get shut down, that's also people. And so whenever we talk about the loss in the way the culture has behaved, there's also the literal loss that people are going through in people's lives, in jobs, in businesses having to close up, in all of those things. And so we do become more and more, I think, a community that not only is battling the disease, but is battling loss and what all that means. And loss also strikes for us not just our present loss, but it takes us back to previous losses. And so there can be some processing of that piece also.
So when you say that, losing routines or patterns or people now can remind you of those kinds of losses in terms of people or patterns or jobs or whatever in the past as well. And so it just kind of compounds. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, as Megan said, there has been a number of my clients that whenever we do get into the discussion of this, they will refer to the 04 storms that hit this area. They will refer to the hurricane 2 years ago that hit this area. Read in a piece this morning, an Orlando Magic basketball player who lived in New Orleans and got transferred from New Orleans to Houston. He was a teenager, and he got transferred as all of New Orleans moved out of New Orleans. And for him, this has been a very emotional piece as he relives that experience. And it's motivated him to contribute to a couple of funds to aid people. But it is that kicking back of other things that go on in our lives.
And it just adds to the whole mix of anxiety and loss of control and being unsure and how to wrestle with that. But then also the challenge of leadership. And well, Megan, how are you as a leader, and how can a leader deal with all the many hats that they wear?
Yeah, there's I took on some new hats I never thought in life I would wear. Teacher of my kids in homeschool. Whew, that was not a hat I willingly picked up. But I think that we have to recognize as leaders, especially all of the hats that we wear. And then when are you taking them all off? There has to be a time in your day that you take them all off for a moment. And we talk about it with leaders. I talk about it especially with leaders, that you need to be around people that know you for you. I need to have people in my life that know me for Megan, not for mom, not for director, not for therapist, not for wife, but just for Megan and who I am. And I think that's especially important in these times. When we don't have the boundaries of going into work and coming home from work, it would be easy to work all the time. And so there has to be moments where you're taking off the hats, all of the hats that you wear, and giving yourself a break. We work with missionaries a lot overseas, and I think missionaries have an especially hard job because they live in that environment where they're supposed to serve everybody, like a lot of people in ministry, and you have to find the time to take all the hats off and be free of the responsibilities for a bit to let your body rest. And so managing the hats that you wear, being able to say, I'm going to set that aside and do this then, or like, I'm math teacher right now and I just need to be math teacher, even though I don't want to be math teacher. I think those are important things that you have to be very clear on what hats you're wearing when and when they're all coming off.
Can I jump in here?
Please.
Because I work in her office and I used to do her job. And one of the things that I've watched and listened to going on in her too is she's only been director for a year, and she's really jumped into that position and gotten to know it as it was a quote stable organization. As this has come upon us, not-for-profit organizations are very vulnerable in the sense of donors and all of that. And so it's been interesting to watch how she's now had to take a look at staffing and had to take a look at finances and had to take a look at all of those things with a different eye, and learning how you move from what was the normal in the organization to what now is different about that, and responding to board of directors and responding to treasurers and accountants. And because all of those things have to happen along the way in an organization, in churches, or whatever that is, as we move from what was to what is now and what might be, because of that whole piece of the health of that organization too. And so how you approach those things is different than how you approach them in the calm times. And if you haven't led an organization through times like this, this is another new normal for you.
And I think there's a tendency, I had some meetings this week about just like mission statements and values and all of those things. And there was a big tendency in me to cancel it. Like, this is not my priority right now. I've got other things to do, but I stuck with it. And I still gave myself the time that I would have if there wasn't chaos going on to do it. And it helped me center back to our mission of why we're doing things, even in crisis, and how it's still focused on our mission. And I think as leaders, we when we have a tendency to cancel those meetings, to stop and see it through. Maybe shorten it, but don't give up that time that you would have dedicated as a leader to focusing on those things, because they're still important in this time.
And all of that requires maybe a heightened self-awareness of what hat you're wearing and what you're leaning into, and even taking all the hats off and just being you. I was listening to an interview of a Italian doctor on the news last night, and he said, you know, the break that I get is when I go through my doors at home and I turn some music on, and just for a couple of hours, I get to be a normal human being rather than, you know, dealing with the crisis. And that's what I hear you saying, being self-aware so that you can be intentional about whatever hat you are wearing and being helpful in wearing that hat or productive. Yeah. Well, so what might leaders remember in dealing with anxiety in their organizations and within themselves, Rick?
Well, I do believe it's important to understand that you really don't go through change without a degree of anxiety, greater or lesser. Anxiety is a natural response to change. Anxiety is not necessarily a negative piece. It's a warning. It's a warning piece that we have been given within our body and within our being. And so it warns us, and it says something to us. And so it's important for us to pay attention to it, not just deny it, not just stuff it. We're probably going to hear a lot of anxiety from those around us. You know, could be our family, could be our staff, could be our board, could be whoever, could be congregation members, whoever, that we're going to hear a lot of anxiety because we're the leader or leaders. And so usually that those things and anxiety gets shot and moves up the chain to the leaders, because it's usually said that leaders are the one that receive, well, it's either those who are perceived to be most powerful or those who are most vulnerable is to where anxiety resides. And so expect it, know it's going to be there, maybe not even looking at it as positive or negative. I really encourage leaders that before you start to move on responding to any of that, it is important to stop and check in, as you were saying, be self-aware. Where is your own anxiety? If I'm going to shut down the awareness of my own anxiety just to respond to the anxiety of those around me, then I'm not going to be aware of what's going on in me, which may cause a reaction that I didn't want to be caused because I'm not aware of what's going on. And so I think it's real important to pause, to check yourself. Find out where you are with things. Find out where you are with your anxiety, with the situation with your family or your health or whatever is there, your finances or whatever that may be, so that you know where you are so you can respond from that position. We used to say to leaders that it's important to be a non-anxious presence. I personally don't believe that in the middle of anxiety, it's possible for human beings to be non-anxious. I think what's important to do is to know where the anxiety is, and after working with yourself, to find a place so that you can be a less anxious presence. I think that's what you can offer to your organization. But being aware of where your anxiety is, being aware of how you're going to cope with that, how you're going to move from that. We often use the phrase as we talk about the brain, the amygdala, which is in the lower part, and the prefrontal cortex, which is in the upper part, how important it is in anxious times to find a way to check ourselves and go upstairs, to move out of the anxious place and running around in that place and move up to where you can be creative and logical and think through and find solutions and find ways to provide peace for yourself and for others.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's doable to be intentional and to shift your thinking up there. But it begins with that being self-aware, I would think.
Well, and also begins with what you just said, that knowing that it is doable. Mm-hmm. If I convince myself that I can't change my level of anxiety because of all of these anxious people around me, then guess what? You're not going to change your level of anxiety. You're going to point them in that place. But if you understand that, as spiritual people, if you understand that God offers you through the power of His Spirit, through the power of Word and Sacrament, that He offers you a place where you can trust in Him, which is not connected to knowing what's going to happen. It's connected only to a place that says, I know a good and gracious God, and I know He will bring me through all things. So you got to know that you don't have to be anxious, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And isn't there also a mirroring function in our brains that we will mirror the behaviors, the attitudes of those around us? And so as a leader, we would want to be careful what we are modeling in terms of anxiety with those around us. Can either of you say more about that?
Yeah, we talk about mirror neurons in your brain. You have mirror neurons, and they're very healthy and are helpful in the work that we do, because you can make a person feel at ease when you reflect back to them what they're reflecting to you, when you mirror their facial expressions. I think what you're saying is, in times of anxiety, it is very easy to mirror others' anxiety. It is very easy for me to hear Rick's anxiety, launch off of his anxiety into my own anxiety. And as a leader, and that's why I think it's important to still be connected to your mission and your values, because as a leader, you need to check how much you're taking on of other people's anxiety and where you're rooted in. It's easy for me at times, and I do this a lot, like I just start walking fast. Why are we walking fast? There's no fire. Like, just slow down, Megan. I catch myself saying that a lot. And so it's that check of yourself, like if everybody else is scrambling around you, why all of a sudden are you scrambling? And so it has to be a lot of self-awareness, I believe, as a leader. And a lot of those times that you're taking off the hats and getting connected back to your healthy habits so that you're calming your own anxiety and we're not taking on the anxiety of everybody else.
There's also a mirroring effect I guess you can call it a mirroring effect in terms of projection. Mm-hmm. That if I don't feel real confident as a leader right now, I don't have a clue what to do, and I'm struggling with that, and I don't feel good about that. It's important for us to understand, because what we can do with that is to say, well, if I don't feel good and strong about me as a leader, then you must not feel good and strong about me as a leader. And now I feel terrible because you think of me that way.
Right.
And so then we start feeling less than among other people and all, because we think that they're thinking what we're thinking about ourselves. And once again, we've got to pause. We got to calm down. We got to be honest and say, I don't have a clue what to do right now. So who can I talk to? Where can I get some help? How can I pause and gain some clues as to what to do? So yeah, that's the other piece.
And I did that as a leader this week for sure. I heard some things and I was like, oh, they think I'm doing a horrible job. And so I shared what they said to me with some other people, and they're like, I don't hear that at all. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's me, right? Taking my own insecurities, projecting them on other people, and hearing how other people affirm them, when that's probably not where they were coming at all. And I think that's important to have those people that you trust, that you can bounce things off of it and say, do you hear that way? Or is that just me because I am feeling insecure at the moment? And I think that's important to do as a leader.
But it's also to be very honest and say, we have not been here before. And there is a large degree of the fact that we don't really know what to do. And the best we can do sometimes is, work as a team with other people. We figure out, let's take a shot at this. Let's move this way. And maybe sometimes the ready, fire, aim approach is better because I really don't know exactly what to do. But we're going to work together to try to do something and work at it along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that requires a leader to be transparent enough to be honest with self and others,
Right.
but also that degree of integrity, so that you're just not giving people butterflies and rainbows, but honesty. But on the other hand, not being thoughtless and reactive and
Right.
spewing your anxiety so that things spiral downward either. And I appreciate what you said, Rick, about so who can you talk to, and who can help you pause and think things through so that you can be honest with self and then honest with others, so that ultimately there's teamwork and collaboration, that we're better together than apart. That's great. That's great help.
Lone Rangers don't usually work well in the long run.
Yeah.
They don't work real well in the short run, but they definitely don't work real well in the long run. And as we move along, and so
Well, what other suggestions would you have? What might that kind of other kinds of self-care look like for a leader, and why is it important? If maybe either one of you could help with that one.
I think, and Megan has said some of those that I agree with, but I think it is really important to come home and take hats off. And sometimes, because of what's going on in schools and stuff, that as a parent that is the leader of an organization, they have to come home and be co-parent with someone else who's been doing that all day long. And so now I got to be parent and all of that. And so, but somewhere in the day, or somewhere at least within 2 days, it is finding a way to take them all off and be you. Maybe the way you do that is you go for a walk. Maybe the way you do that is you get up early in the morning or stay up late and you have time all by yourself where you can do what you want. Exercise, I think exercise is vital. It's vital for the body. It's vital for the endorphins, which can be helpful, but it's also vital if you do that by yourself, because it can get you into that realm of trying to accomplish that exercise for you rather than trying to accomplish all the others. Eating well is good. This is a very great time for stress eating.
Yeah.
Eating just because I'm stressful instead of eating when I need to, what I need to, and those kind of things. Maybe if your beliefs or your ability allows you to consume alcoholic beverage, make sure you're watching it, that it's that stress and that anxiety isn't leading to more than one or two that calms you down. So those kind of things.
For me, it's been about, I can be, for me, one, I have a chronic condition. I have chronic pain. And so if I get off my schedule of exercise, sleep, eating healthy, and taking my medicine, I know I spiral. And so I need to make sure that the things that I would do for myself when I had this very regimented schedule are still there. I have an accountability partner that we do a devotion each morning, and we had kind of let that lapse for a bit. And so we're getting back onto that. And so when I talk to clients about anxiety and depression, it is always exercise, eat, sleep, but then socialize. Socialization is important. And I know introverts are probably loving it now, but I get more concerned for introverts at this time because it's easy to isolate. It's easy to hide up in our houses. And so we really need to be in community with people. And as a leader, yes, you're going to be in community with people, but again, you need to be in community with people that know you for you, right? And so it's not just about board meetings and, Zoom calls. It's about connecting with people in that relationship. And I've shared a lot with parents of teens right now. I get it that if they're smart enough, you want to take their phone from them, but right now would not be a good time to take your kid's phone from them. It would just isolate them even more. And so planning times where you connect with people is so important. It needs to be done, and it almost needs to be more of a priority than anything else. I'm an extrovert. I am a very extroverted person. I want to talk to people. I'll open the door and yell across to the neighbor, hey, how you doing? Like, I just need people in my life. So that's very important at these times of self-care. Anything that you can do to set a schedule for yourself, I think, is the best. And so use the alarm app on your phone to remind yourself to eat, or to keep yourself to eating only 3 times. Use the bedtime app. Like, use the things, the tools that we have to keep you in those healthy self-care pieces. And I know Rick and I, like, one of the pieces that make us who we are is watching sports. And so, like, my skin curls that there's no hockey on, there's nothing that I can just like watch, because that's a part of being me. So I've been watching highlight reels of my Lightning when they won and didn't get kicked out of the playoffs. But so whatever you can do to connect to those things that bring you joy, you need that in your life right now.
That's a great encouragement. As I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about my wife and I took a walk a couple nights ago, and the Dunkin' Donuts happened to be open, and we were like, oh yeah, let's go. And I ended up walking home with a dozen donuts. I never do that. I never, we almost never eat all that extra, carbs and sugar. And there I was with a dozen donuts on the counter, and our kids were like, what? But then also last night, or the night before, I made some phone calls to people I haven't talked to in months. And when I hung up, and I tend toward the introverted side. And when I hung up, I was pumped. I was so happy. And I paused and I noticed that about myself. And so as you talk about connecting with people, boy, that really resonated with me.
I think too. So my husband and I have packed weekends, usually with volleyball. And so all these weekends were supposed to be scheduled out, and now they're not. So we've gotten on the kayak probably 6 times in the last week, which is like, we haven't been able to do that much. And to get out in the open water away from the technology, like my phone isn't buzzing, nobody's requesting a meeting, that has been so great. And I love the open water. And so just to be out there, I understand if you live up north, you're sick of me posting pictures on my kayak, but it is nice to be able to connect with God's creation too, away from the technology that we're using so much right now, to just silence the noise.
It's beautiful.
I think of also the self-care. We are given an opportunity as families and couples, because of the regulations of the city and all, that says you have to stay in. And so it forces us to stay in and play games, do whatever. Get a text from a friend that says, call me when the game's over. Samuel, there's no game, and those kind of things. And but I do, and I guess it's because of the work we do. I do try to remember those that I know and those around us who going home and spending a weekend or 14 days at home is not a safe place. And being aware of the folks that have tendencies towards acting out their addictions and acting out abuse, and how important it is, if you have those connections with people that do that, to be able to touch base with them, encourage them, try to soothe them, and also to be in touch with those who could be victims, and to give them an opportunity or suggestions of where to go and those kind of things. Because it is a reality of this time as well, and that's going to take place, and probably already is taking place. And so I think it's important we remember that in relationships as well.
Oh, that's a great reminder and helpful. We can be of service to neighbor in so many ways there. Well, is there anything else that y'all would like to share in terms of anxiety or leadership or other before we wrap up for today?
I, as hard as it is, I think it is important, and I agree. I like to hear what Megan did about working with the coach that is talking future. I think it is important to think of future. in these times. If all I do is day to day, and all I do is to get through now, and if all I do is read the numbers of now or whatever, I can get stuck in now. I think now is a great time to, number one, trust in the fact that there is a better future out there coming. We are going to get through this. I'm not real sure what it's going to look like when I do, but maybe we can even start dreaming of some possibilities of maybe this, maybe that. And what we get to do whenever it's done is we get to put a few of those together. But it's the future that draws us. It's not getting stuck in the present or getting stuck in the past that moves us in our lives. And so I think it's important to do that, appropriately.
I would also say that understand in times of loss, which is this is a time of loss, our emotions go in waves. And if you find yourself sad, if you find yourself angry or really happy, allow yourself to have that wave of emotion wash over you. Don't fight it. Be safe in it. Like, let yourself cry, let yourself yell, but understand that it might look like these big waves of emotion, and you need to allow them to wash over you.
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. Well, how can people get in touch with Lutheran Counseling Services and you guys for support and help?
We're launching a lot of virtual groups in the coming week for a lot of different populations. One of the best ways to connect with us is to go to our website or to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and Facebook. We're going to be releasing a lot in April, especially activities for older adults. We run an older adult program, and currently we're not physically able to go into any of our facilities. So we're going to be launching groups on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for older adults, videos and things that they can view and things that they can do in their home when they are very isolated at this time. So I'd encourage everybody to connect to our social media. But as we shared, our offices are open. Our phones are open. We are answering our phones. We are seeing clients face-to-face and virtually. We've had a rise in some abuse and domestic violence calls, which we normally don't get that many. So we just want to be a place where we can be responsive and answer the need that's out there in the community.
Could you share your website, email, and telephone number with us?
Yes, so our website is LCS, as in Lutheran Counseling Services, and FL for Florida.com, so LCSFL.com. Our phone number is 407-644-4692. And then you can just follow us on Facebook or Instagram at Lutheran Counseling Services.
My email address would be Armstrong with LCSFL.com, and hers is?
Mine's M as in Megan and Meisler at my last name at LCSFL.com. We do ministry for church workers and make ourselves available for response to anything that's going on in churches and in people's lives. So please reach out.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining us. You've shared so much that I think is going to make a big difference as we work our way through this coronavirus. And we also want to thank our listeners and now our viewers for checking out the Coaching Leader podcast. And we look forward to any way in which we might be helpful. You can check us out at scottgress.com or scottgress@me.com. So God bless you, and God bless your leading during these anxious times. Thanks for watching.